Oh my gosh, welcome. Today is the official launch of reGEN Media, and we are here on the Sunshine Coast, which is the traditional and ancestral and unceded territories of the Squamish Nation. And I am so excited to be here and hosting this conversation with the Braid. We haven't been in person for a long time, and so it's very, very exciting. And we are going to be diving into a conversation about braiding in the boardroom. And it's like, okay, we're talking about reGEN Media, braiding in the boardroom. How are those interconnected? And for those of you who are kind of wondering that, we're going to get there because it's going to make sense in this conversation. So I am absolutely thrilled to be here and so pleased that you're all listening and joining us. The conversations that have taken place so far have been absolutely magical and very, very inspirational. So make sure that you check them out. So we often refer to ourselves as the Braid, and we're all four very different leaders. We have different areas of expertise, different passions, different ways of seeing the world, very different gifts that we bring. So let's start with the concept just of braiding. Like, what does it mean to you and why does it matter? So maybe Tina, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Then I want to make sure we hook into you because the whole concept of braiding came out of this conversation. I'm not just doing it for you. That's braiding. That's actually right. Yeah, that's actually braiding. Because it came out of Shar and just recognizing that one of us can do one thing one way, but when we're braided, you can still operate as a oneness. But now there's four of us creating this one thing with four hands, right? All working together. So that was the piece that really spoke to me. And when I look at our differences and some of the work that I've done in other consciousness circles and such that I'm part of, this piece arose where this concept of, oh yeah, what you do, that means I don't have to. You're carrying that work for me. You're carrying that torch for me. You are that light for me. Therefore, I don't have to carry that on my shoulders. I don't have to effort my way through something that actually isn't my genius. And I know that you've got that for us. And each of us do that for each other. And so for me, that's the biggest piece about moving that into the boardroom. And it's like, we all just need to have less on our shoulders and feel more free to do the stuff that we're made to do. So for me, that's what it is.
And that's actually based on trust, isn't it? It's actually building relational trust between one another, right? And so that's so key. Sharon, where does that take you?
Well, I think of entrepreneurs and how often a new entrepreneur takes on so much. They're, the chief bottle washer and everything in between. And so braiding is a brilliant way of like Tina said, staying in your zone of genius and doing what you do best, and knowing that the people that you're partnering with, that you're braiding with, they all have a piece of what you need to get done. They all have that genius themselves. So it's maximizing the economies of skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Shar, maybe you can talk a little bit about the impact of braiding in your own life and actually how it's led to this day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these amazing humans know that I wanted to really play into what could I actually do in order to feel more brave, in order to feel more like push into the edges of where I wanted to go as an entrepreneur, as a visionary, and what is something I could tangibly do. And so just by inviting, three of the most powerful women I know with exactly that, different collective genius among us, what might be possible. And yeah, I mean, one thread is so strong, but if you start to braid them together, but also as growing up as a bit of a tomboy, you know, I watched a lot of sports and I could see how, you know, you could be the best player, but if you were on a line that really knew how to literally dance on the ice or practice plays where you almost can anticipate someone else's move because you've worked with them for so long, it's different than anything. I was noticing a big difference between what I saw on a hockey rink or in a football field and what I saw in a boardroom. And I wasn't seeing what I was looking for. There was something missing. And that's where we started to talk about this concept of what might it feel like if we deliberately wove into each other's collective genius, each other's highest giftings in a way that allowed us to be more expansive because of the practice of relational leadership. That's where it all began.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so when we think about that, again, relational leadership and braiding and weaving, and then translate it into what we historically have thought about as what does a boardroom look like, right? And for me, thinking about that and sort of that historical perspective of a boardroom, it's always been about processes and policies and a rigidity that doesn't necessarily lend itself to the best decision making, right? It's about serving the system so that it can stay alive rather than the people that it was designed to serve in the first place. And so from my perspective, when I think about braiding in the boardroom, it is about building relationships, building trust, and creating an environment where intellectual curiosity can thrive, innovation, you can wrestle with complexity and ambiguity and be okay with it. That there's a safety of not knowing and actually stepping into risk, and which really connects to again your work right now, Charlene, is with what you're expanding into, and as it relates to reGEN. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because I think we're walking into a new approach in terms of partnerships, in terms of investment, in terms of storytelling and media. And when you walk into something new, when you're truly walking a path of innovation, it's a pretty scary path. But if you're accustomed to the practice of bringing your whole self to that conversation as a leader, a whole self to your discussions, head, heart, and hands, you are more able to be brave in innovation. Because I think what's missing from some of the conversations and some of the training and some of the seminars around innovation and impact and change making is, if we want to operate in those spaces, the toolkits and the tools that are needed actually need to look differently than we've maybe had in the past. So I was searching for what's a tool or a technique or an aspect of my leadership that I haven't already practiced in the last 20 years. Because to be truly innovative, I must be practicing from a new state of being myself. And you very much taught me the head, heart, and hands, and bringing my whole self to the conversation. Braiding for impact came from that. If I can bring my head, heart, and hands, my whole self, but I can also trust completely in what Sharon's whole self will bring. It does. It takes a bit of a weight off of me, and I think that's such an important aspect to lean into when people are looking at new areas of innovation and growth and, solution finding.
Ooh, that's kind of juicy. It actually takes me to a place of, again, when you show up as a whole leader, right? And we're all showing up together in our best selves and all of our bits and pieces in the room. There are times then actually where when you're then holding tension and risk, it's right, the temptation is to kind of disappear.
Well, I actually want to take a step back, because I think we've been doing this for so long that even the term of bring your whole self, we're like, oh yeah, well duh, that's what you do. But when I think about, if I go and walk into another boardroom where there isn't a practice of braiding, it's really scary to bring your whole self there. And like even just learning how to do that, what we're talking about, you might be watching this going, well, duh, like around, oh, this is just a bunch of different departments, people holding their own genius, just they're different departments around a table. But it's not just different departments around a table, it's different geniuses around the table. And then you said the word safety, feeling safe enough, not only that you've got me, but that I can, I don't have to effort the whole thing on my own because your genius is going to do your bit and I'm going to do mine. But it's the safety of showing up as a whole person. There's all the work that Brené Brown does on vulnerability. What we're really talking about, step one, I would suggest, before you can even braid, you have to establish trust. And what's that? And then we can start going, hey, Sharon's got me, Shara's got me, Christina's got me, or like I come from an arts background, and when you work together long enough, like you said, it's like, not only do I know Shara's got me, but she's actually just figured out my impulse. I just had an impulse, she felt it, and now she's running with it. And that's time, but I think we can shorten the time if we bring our whole selves into the room. And so what do we need to create that kind of safety in a boardroom where we can even begin to start weaving and
Okay,
braiding?
but we're talking about whole self.
Yeah.
So let's define whole self. Because that's where we have to start, is the whole self. So the whole self for me is, like you said, I like to call them gnarly bits and pieces. but just the shadow side of us, the bitchy part, the annoying part, the frustrated part, the part that of us, and not even just that, it's the other side as well. It's the more spiritual and vulnerable side of us that we actually don't typically, we're taught not to bring that into the boardroom. We're taught not to bring that into business. It's not, we're not supposed to show the vulnerable side of us in business, especially as women,
Right.
So that is bringing your whole self. When you include all of that, that to me is bringing my whole self to the table.
And when I show up as a human, and I humanize you as well instead of demonize you, then we actually, that creates safety, because I know you'll see all of me. Here's the interesting thing though, is that we happen to all really like each other and get along. We have a lot of fun. But I think what's interesting is you actually don't have to like the people in the boardroom. I mean, it's great if you do, but you actually don't have to really like one another. But you can still build trust and get stuff done when you know and respect one another, when you humanize each other, when you see when there's not a culture of blaming or shaming or finger pointing, but there's actually a culture of, again, empathy and innovation and curiosity, and that requires, that's both an inside job and an outside job, right? And so for leaders, bringing their whole self into the boardroom requires an ownership of their own emotional landscape and the emotional landscape of the entire room.
And just to finish this part of like the whole leadership point, when I was younger, working in the corporate world, I would dress a certain way to the office. And when the buzzer would go, end of day, my hair would go up in a ponytail. I'd grab my gym bag and I would go to a different part of my life. And the interesting thing is when I started my own business, I was like, no, I mean, that's exhausting. And I think so many people in business, professionals, they are so fragmented about how they need to show up. They have to check which, and of course the last couple of years has changed that slightly, right? We are more authentically who we are, right? We joke about having a nice top and scrubs on the bottom or whatever, but the other piece of our whole self is if you don't know me and respect me as a spiritual being that is on my own healing journey, if you don't know that, see that, and respect that, then how can you fully know me as an innovator, an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, a visionary? Because that's a really important part of who I am. And you're missing out if you don't know all of me or see all of me.
I mean, that's a good point, because I don't know when that happened, that we got separated, like we got split. It's like, no, you can't show that side of you. That's not appropriate for business.
Well, it's because we vilified emotions as if they aren't driving the bus, right? Like, it's like, well, actually, your emotional landscape is if you're not aware of it, then you're not paying attention to what's going on. And I think it's Brene Brown, actually, that says, you ignore the emotional landscape of people and yourself at your peril, because it'll show up. And how many times have we heard things like, well, I don't want emotions in our decision making, and it's like, it's there already. At least let's talk about it and acknowledge it. And where does it get in the way? Like, what is present in this room right now? And then how do we hold the space for that and still make sure that we're making those wise, grounded, non-anxious decisions for the future?
Well, it's like it's okay, but it's just like we're all adults. So, I mean, emotional intelligence kicks in. I mean, when you say don't bring the emotions, it's like you're not talking to a bunch of kids here,
And I want to say this, to me, this is where braiding comes back in. Because if I'm having an off day, and I've had them, Char will actually say to me, have you sweat today? Because she knows, right? If I don't work out, I'm actually not very grounded. And she won't call me out. Well, she can call me out because we have that relationship. But like, I know that on some of my worst days, some of you will see that I'm having a rough day, and you'll actually step in, because I'm bringing my whole self in the room. I'm hopefully in check, and my emotional life isn't spilling all over the table. But even if it was, one of you would step in and say, hey, T, can I get you a cup of tea? Hey, T, you know what? What do you need?
Yeah.
And then you would pick up the piece where I can't pick up right now because I'm not present. I'm present somewhere else. And you would run with what's needed in the room. And that's weaving, that's braiding. That's moving as a team. That's like the whole athletic hockey team thing, right? So,
That's really interesting, because one of the things that we do as a team is actually we do presencing work to bring everybody in. And that's one of the things I do in my own work now is helping the people that I work with bring their whole selves into the room. Because oftentimes our energy is scattered in a variety of different places. So part of whole leadership is, again, inviting, bringing yourself back into your own presence so that you can fully be here and show up. And so sometimes we'll do just the check-ins that we do and the presencing exercises that we do allow us to be where our feet are. Right? Which is so amazing.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of time and money and resources spent on how do we make sure we're getting the most out of our executive team. But what excites me about this conversation and where we're going with relational leadership is let's go with the pieces that we haven't talked about yet. So we really focused on how am I getting the most out of, each member of my executive team, what do they need? But what if the greatness was in the glue between? What if, like, beyond effective communication, like, really, I know to be the leader I want to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years, I need to be looking at ways to build stronger teams and stronger leaders in a way that I haven't even touched yet in the last 20 or 30 years. So if we're having the same type of conversations about effective and efficient leadership and leadership teams, I think we need to change that narrative. We need to shift that narrative. And that's why I'm excited about some of the pieces that we're exploring for ourselves. And if you're not living it, don't teach it. If you're not living it, you're not living it, right? So that's a big part of why we do what we do, like live it and then lead it, live it, then lead it, right?
So, okay, so on that then, are you okay if let's jump to you and reGEN Media, because you're the founder of powHERhouse, which is how we're all here. And now you've had the Braid, us, hands at your back, and you are launching this next big vision piece for you. How much of reGEN is connected to feeling braided and woven?
Yeah, a huge part of it. I think the whole reason I called in such a powerful braid years ago was because I was preparing, whether I knew it or not, I was preparing for this time and this vision that's been with me, since I was 13 years old. But when I think about the relational leadership that has been so important to me in building powHERhouse in the last 8 years, the question I always ask you guys, well, for what purpose? Well, now I can see for what purpose. All of those seeds were planted, all of those relationships built, and different pieces experimented. But now it's going to the next step of my own journey, and that is, through the vehicle of reGEN, being able to really tap into what is the story we're writing for ourselves next. What's the story I'm writing? What's the story we're writing? What's the story society is writing that we want to live into next? Because the power of media is in our hands. And, to bring it into the corporate conversation, I've played in the corporate space a good portion of my life, and then jumping into this social entrepreneurial space. But what excites me and what I so respect from a corporation is that they actually are our planet's, in my view, most powerful change-making vehicle. And I'll take it a step further. I think a corporation is the most powerful change-making organism if they see themselves as that. And the power that they have throughout their all of the lives they touch, from their employees to their shareholders, to their suppliers, to the employees' families, to their customers, that's an incredible distribution system of change making, and just to start to have conversations about, if you're an organism, how are you beating out change? What's the drumbeat of change that you're beating out to the people that are watching you? What are you breathing in your organization? What's the change making work because if you're not beating and you're not breathing it, you're not being it. And those are the conversations that we want to have through the Braid and externally through the power of media.
And that requires bravery, it requires requires boldness, it requires vulnerability and humility, it requires ownership, and it actually requires love, right?
So much.
It really boils down to, it comes back to love. And we need that power to shift the narrative and to see what's possible. Because we're watching people get caught up in a vortex of what's wrong with the world. And there's plenty of ways to get focused on that. But what are we going to do differently? What's right? And follow that, right? Follow the energy of what is possible. And so whether you're braiding in the boardroom, whether you're producing regenerative media that's transforming the narrative, do it in the power of love, right? Act from that place. Love of people, love of land, love of water, love of air, love of all of our bits and pieces. It's a very powerful energy. And interestingly enough, there's actually a lot of research that demonstrates that is in fact true. Right? Yeah, so awesome. Wow, well, thank you very much for joining us today. The Braid here celebrating the official launch of reGEN Media. We invite you to join the story of reGEN and visit reGENimpactmedia.com to learn how you can support. I've been joined here with Tina and Sharon, Charlene, and myself, and we appreciate you being here. So let's continue the conversation together.
Thank you.